of people, and the number of people who are over the age of 65 will be the greatest ever in the history of the world. Right? We know that. So that's why I believe these numbers are wrong. The ones that I showed you initially. I think there's going to be much, 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 much more. But thank God we have treatments that can preserve your vision. Now, let's talk about the risk factors for macular degeneration. The main risk factor is you can always blame your parents. Okay? And I try to do that all the time. My dad's here. I blame him for everything. You know, I'll share you something. I have gout. Okay? My dad's fault. Okay? It's his fault. Okay? And I do everything I can to try to. I don't eat meat and I do all these things. I still get gout, and it's my dad's fault. Okay? So if you have macular degeneration, you can blame it on your parents. As easy as that. Actually, it's actually a very true statement, because if one of your parents is affected with macular degeneration, you have a 50% chance of having severe macular degeneration. That sucks. That's awful, isn't it? And you know, if either of your parents are didn't have macular degeneration, you still have a 12% chance of getting macular degeneration. That really sucks. You know, I mean, then you can't even blame your parents. I don't know who you blame. You know. Now, the other risk factor, of course, that we can't control is age, right? I mean, the alternative to aging is not too good. You know, I don't want to mention it, but you know, it's not a good alternative. So I prefer that you guys, you know, everybody lives much, much longer, right? But we have to deal with these things. Now, the gender issue, actually, women are, well, at least from studies, women tend to have macular degeneration more than men. But I think that that's just a factor of age. Women actually live longer than men. I mean, lucky you guys, you know. And so there are more women than there are men, right? And if they get older, well, then women it'll be more prevalent. So I think that's just a factor of age. Now, there are modifiable risk factors. Modifiable risk factors, okay? One which most people don't know is that there is a macular pigment inside your eye, which when you're 17 years old protects you, okay? But when you get older, it depletes. I call them the blue blocker, the natural blue blockers. And people who have low macular pigment, as they get older, I mean, so let me give you an example. When you're 17 years old, you have great blue blocking capacity, macular pigment inside your eye. When you're 70, you probably have only 30% of what you had. And that's a time when you need it, right? That's, you know, we advise you, you gotta wear sunglasses all the time, protect yourself from the sunlight. But you know, while you're putting the sunglasses on, well, you've lost your natural sunglasses. That kind of sucks. Now, smoking is the biggest modifiable risk factor. Unfortunately, if you smoked for a long time, you really can't take that back. The damage has already been done. On average, if you smoke more than 20 pack years, well, that's 1 pack a day for 20 years, your risk is probably 300% more than somebody who didn't smoke, with the same genetics, etc., same age, all that kind of stuff. And that's why I see a lot of smokers in their 60s developing wet macular degeneration. I actually, you know, I've been doing this long enough that I can look at somebody's eye and tell them how long they smoked. It's uncanny. It really is uncanny. I actually, and then this is what I get a lot. I look at people's eyes and I go, "You smoke?" And they go, "Oh no, I don't smoke." And I said, "You used to smoke." "Oh yeah, I quit a week ago." So you know, you got to check that, right? Of course, cardiovascular disease, that's a big player, as always, but that's another modifiable risk factor, but it's not as important as the smoking and the poor diet, actually. Actually, I missed the poor diet, but Joanna Seddon, who I just spoke at my meeting in Sarasota, she has these pictures, and it's like pictures of people who have different body habitus. So some people are really thin, and then the other people who are pear-shaped. And she said that that's a very big risk factor. It's how your body is shaped. And then I looked at one of the pictures. It was the ones that was bad. And I said, darn it, Joanna, that looks just like me. What'd you do? You put me against a wall and you copied and traced me, and of course it was the bad one. So I have a pretty, I've been fighting the battle of the bulge, we all do, right? But that was a very big risk factor. So I do thank my parents that they are Filipino, and we have a much less risk of, genetically at least, of getting maturation. But if you looked at the body mass index, I'm pretty bad off, okay? So, but that's another thing that you can alter, and it's hard. I mean, you have to diet, and it's very difficult to lose your weight. And also, that's also genetic, how you look, how your body habitus looks like. Now, I'm going to try to explain to you in my terms what goes wrong in macular degeneration, okay? And I'm going to do this in a way that hopefully you can understand. Now, please pardon and I'm taking some creative license here to try to explain it. But I told you that genes, your parents are the ones to blame, okay? Well, we discovered what those genes are. And those genes are involved in something called inflammation. Now, in this room, how many people know what inflammation is, or have a good idea? Raise your hand. Okay, so for you that know what inflammation is, I'm going to pardon myself because I'm going to try to explain it in terms that my 11-year-old can understand. Okay? Inflammation is the way the body fights off infections, right? It's like the army of our body. So you have a foreign invader like a bacteria or a virus, right? And that bacteria or virus needs to be attacked so it doesn't kill you. And that's why we have inflammation. The problem is that sometimes our armies are too good and they get too big. And as a result, they have logistical problems. And that's the problem of something called friendly fire. There's a cartoon here that says, quick, take cover, it's one of ours, right? The thing is that we're supposed to have basic mechanisms inside our body to protect us so that our army won't kill us, right? That's why our armies have flags and we have uniforms so that I can identify that's the enemy and that's our friend, right? Well, if you have a genetic defect, our immune system doesn't realize that this is our friend. So let's say you're one of those nice garbage men inside your eye, right? And let's say you have an infection somewhere in your body. Well, the garbage man's uniform sort of looks like the enemy's uniform. And bang, it gets destroyed, right? And that's what happens a lot inside the eye if you have these defects. Now, what happens is that friendly fire slowly develops destruction inside that part of the eye that I was talking about. And there's all this debris of destroyed cells. And what happens to those cells? They start rusting. That's a process called oxidation, and I'll hammer that in to you in later talks. But here's a picture of a car that was bombed in Beirut. And it's just sitting there, right? It's rusting, and it's been bombed, it's useless, etc. And what happens, and this is the other process that occurs, is that as we get older, the garbage men retire. So, they think their retirement age is 65. And they retire at 65, mind you. That's what happens. So, when you're under the age of 65, these RP cells, they take away that debris. They'll clear it out. But then the garbage men, the RP cells, they're unionized, so they have to retire at 65. And as a result, and also they get kind of slowed down as well. We all get slowed down when we reach a certain age. And we call that in science senescence. I guess that's what happens to me also. I get senescent. And what happens is you get this buildup of junk. It piles up. Imagine if this would be a nightmare. If my waste engineers went on strike, I mean, my God, my front yard would be a mess, right? And then you had to worry about the rats and the cats and the cockroaches, etc., right? Well, that's what's happening inside your eye. That's what's happening inside your eye. It's rusting and the debris is building up. And you know what we call that debris? Drusen. The yellow stuff that I was telling you about, dry macular degeneration. Now, the rust makes the cells, or the garbage men, call out for help. Okay? And the way they call out for help is they upregulate a gene that it's called vascular endothelial growth factor. And this is what, you know, what I worked on for a long, long time. They used to call me the VEGF guy back in the 90s because this was my, well, I guess my claim to fame, actually. And we found out that this weed grow, VEGF, was the main player. That was what the RP cells, or the garbage men, were calling out to make the blood vessels grow into the rust. Which makes sense, right? If you want to get rid of junk, well, you have to call in the reinforcements. So it's just these garbage men going, hey, you got to get some blood vessels in here so I can get rid of all this junk. Because it's really building up, right? And that's exactly what happened. It's actually interesting because this gene was the gene. It's supposed to work when you're developing in the embryo. It's responsible for making your heart, your blood vessels, etc. When you're an embryo, right? But it's supposed to shut off after you're born, at least in the eye, not in your heart, not in other places. Now, the issue is that we figured out that if you wanted to stop these blood vessels from growing, you just have to attack VEGF. And that's what we developed. And that's why I was able to work on all the treatments that we have available now for wet macular degeneration. Now, the advanced dry is a little bit different because sometimes the eye cannot call out the VEGF. But instead, it's really a balance of the kind of waste that's being built up in the back of the eye. There is a waste product which is a waste of the factory that produces vision. I call that waste product A2E. And just suffice to say that's what it is. It actually, A2E, it can be identified in pictures. There's a picture here of a patient who has a lot of corrosion, and there's a white ring around it. That's A2E. Now, A2E is actually a bad player. What it does is that if it builds up in the back of the eye, and you shine blue light at it, it causes it to rust at an accelerated pace, and it makes a toxic waste material. It's almost as toxic as the stuff that those two Japanese workers stepped into in the radioactive plant over in Fukushima, which I actually gave a lecture there in November as well. And that's what accelerates the corrosion that we see in the advanced dry macular degeneration. And that's the reason why some people go wet and some people go dry. It's based on what kind of waste is actually produced around the eye. So, in summary, friendly fire caused by genetic problems produces inflammatory destruction which builds debris. The garbage men retire. The debris builds up and rusts. VEGF increases blood vessel growth. And then if you go the other way, the exhaust from the vision, the factory of vision, results in toxic rust which accelerates corrosion. I hope that's understandable. Thank you.